My best friend accused me of cheating on my husband and went behind my back to tell him. Now my marriage is on the line, and I can't believe what she did. I, 30F, have been married to my husband, Alex, 32M, for 5 years. We have a good, solid relationship and trust each other completely. I've always been very close with my best friend, Emily, 29F, and we've been friends since high school. However, recently, our friendship has been put to the test. A few months ago, I went on a business trip for a week, and during that time, I noticed Emily was acting a bit strange. She seemed distant and wouldn't respond to my texts as quickly as usual, but I didn't think much of it. I figured she was just busy with her own life. When I came back from the trip, Alex confronted me about something that completely threw me off. He told me that Emily had contacted him while I was away and accused me of cheating on him. She claimed that she saw the way I was flirting with someone at a work event and that I had been texting other guys in a way that seemed inappropriate. I was absolutely shocked and devastated. There was no truth to what she said, and I couldn't understand why Emily would tell Alex something like that. I've never once been unfaithful, and I had no idea where she got these ideas from. I confronted Emily, and she admitted that she had seen me talking to a male colleague at the event, but she took everything out of context. She said she didn't like the way he was looking at me and assumed something was going on. I was furious. Emily had never said anything to me about her concerns, and instead, she went behind my back and accused me of cheating. I told her that I couldn't trust her anymore and that I needed space. She apologized, but the damage was done. It felt like she completely betrayed me and violated my trust. And now some of our mutual friends are telling me that I should forgive Emily, saying that she was just looking out for me and that she was worried about my relationship. But I don't feel like I can ever get past what she did. I've tried to move on, but every time I think about it, I feel so hurt and betrayed. So, Aida for not forgiving my best friend after she told my husband I was cheating on him? Update 1. So after everything with Emily, I couldn't shake the feeling that something more was going on. Her accusation felt so out of left field, and I was bothered by how confidently she went behind my back. I mean, we'd been best friends for over a decade, and she just assumed the worst about me without even talking to me first. I knew I had to figure out why she'd act this way, but I was worried about what I might find out. Still, I decided to look into things a bit. First, I checked with Alex to see if he'd noticed anything unusual with Emily while I was away. He said no, but he also told me something that made my heart drop. He admitted that during one of their conversations, she'd been really insistent about getting specific details of our marriage. Like, she asked him questions about whether he felt like I was giving him enough attention, or if he ever thought I might be hiding things from him. He said it felt off to him, but he didn't want to make a big deal about it at the time. He figured maybe she was just concerned as my friend, and he'd brushed it off. Hearing that, I felt so uncomfortable. Emily wasn't just being a protective friend. She was prying, trying to sow doubt between us. That just didn't feel like someone who was looking out for me. With that new information, I went through our recent messages and looked for anything that seemed off. That's when I noticed something weird. She'd stopped sending me as many texts over the past month, which was pretty unusual. It wasn't just that she wasn't responding when I was away. She had already been acting distant for a while. And it wasn't like she was just busy with work. I'd see her posting on social media, going out, spending time with other friends, but she never invited me along. It felt strange, like she was avoiding me even before I left for that work trip. When I confronted her about it, she gave me the same excuse she'd given Alex. She just didn't like the way the guy at work had looked at me, and she assumed I was cheating because of it. But something about her explanation didn't add up. Why would she have waited to tell Alex until I was out of town? And if she really was worried, why wouldn't she just ask me about it directly? I pressed her on it, and she got defensive. She started accusing me of being sensitive and said I was making a big deal out of nothing. That reaction only made me more suspicious. After I ended the call with Emily, I couldn't stop replaying everything in my mind. I started wondering if maybe she had some hidden agenda or if she was just jealous. I mean, it hurt to even think about my best friend like that, but the whole thing just didn't feel like a simple misunderstanding. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that Emily's behavior had been changing for months. There'd been small moments that seemed weird, but I brushed them off. Like, she'd sometimes make strange comments about my marriage, like jokingly asking if I regretted settling down so young, or if I'd ever thought about having a little fun on the side. At the time, I laughed it off as her usual humor, but now it felt like she'd been dropping hints or testing my reaction to see if I'd actually cheat. Just when I was starting to lose hope of understanding why she'd do this, I got a message from another friend of ours, Sarah. She told me she'd heard what happened and wanted to give me a heads up about something that might explain things. Sarah, being closer to Emily, had noticed that Emily was hanging around a new guy, Mark. Apparently, Mark was known for being a bit of a troublemaker, and he had a reputation for getting into people's business. Sarah said that since Emily had started spending time with him, she'd been acting differently, and her priorities seemed to have shifted. It didn't make total sense, but it got me thinking. Could Emily be projecting? Or maybe this guy had been whispering things to her that made her doubt me. I didn't want to assume too much, but it was hard to ignore the possibility that someone was feeding her paranoia. So I asked Sarah if she'd heard Emily talk about my relationship, or if she'd mentioned any suspicions before I left for the trip. Sarah hesitated but eventually admitted that Emily had said some things. Apparently, Emily had joked to their group that I was too perfect to be real, and that she wouldn't be surprised if I had a secret side. It was supposed to be lighthearted, but it sounded more like an excuse to believe her own suspicions. At this point, I was angry but also sad. Here was my best friend of over a decade, throwing around rumors about my marriage, undermining the trust I had with Alex, and, worst of all, doubting my character. I felt betrayed, not just because of the accusations, but because she didn't care enough to come to me directly. It was like she was rooting for me to mess up, so she could say she was right. I decided I needed to confront Emily one last time, not to get her to apologize, but to tell her how I felt and to finally get some closure. When I called her, I laid it all out, everything I'd learned from Alex and Sarah, and asked her why she'd gone behind my back instead of talking to me. Her response? She didn't deny anything. In fact, she got defensive again and accused me of overreacting and being paranoid. She said she was just trying to help and that I should be grateful she cared enough to warn Alex. That was it for me. I told her that if that's her idea of friendship, I didn't want any part of it. I hung up and blocked her on everything. It was like a weight lifted off my shoulders. I felt a mix of relief and sadness. It hurt to lose a friend I'd known for so long, but I realized that friendship can't survive without trust and respect. Update 2. After cutting Emily off, I thought things would settle down. I could finally focus on my marriage without that cloud of doubt over me. But just as I was moving on, I started noticing little things that made me feel uneasy. It wasn't over. I'd blocked Emily on everything, and Alex agreed to do the same, so we could finally put the whole mess behind us. But about a week later, I started getting strange calls from unknown numbers, and sometimes there'd just be silence on the other end, or the person would hang up right away. It freaked me out, and my gut told me it wasn't a coincidence. I had a feeling it might be Emily or someone connected to her. One night, Alex came home visibly irritated, and I asked him what was up. He showed me a message he'd gotten on social media, an anonymous account claiming to be a concerned friend who had proof of me being unfaithful. They sent screenshots of me supposedly flirting with other men, but the messages were clearly edited, full of weird grammar mistakes, and some were dated from times I wasn't even in the same city. Whoever was behind it had no clue what they were doing, but the intent was clear. Someone was trying to convince Alex I was cheating. I couldn't believe it. This was beyond just a bad friend spreading rumors. Now it was an actual attack on my relationship. The thing that really got me, the concerned friend seemed to know details only Emily would know. I was absolutely livid. I never thought Emily would go this far just because I wouldn't forgive her, but here we were. Alex and I discussed our options, and we figured we could ignore it and hope she'd give up, or we could confront her. We decided on a different approach, finding out what exactly was going on before doing anything. I wasn't about to let her keep dragging our lives through this nonsense without knowing what was driving her. I reached out to Sarah, the friend who'd clued me in on Emily's recent behavior with this new guy, Mark. I didn't tell Sarah about the recent messages, but I asked her if she'd heard anything more about Emily's life lately. Sarah admitted that she hadn't talked to Emily as much either. Apparently, a lot of their friends were feeling weird about her behavior. But Sarah also shared a detail I hadn't known. Mark had recently been dumped by his girlfriend of 3 years, and it turns out the breakup was messy. According to Sarah, Mark blamed his ex for cheating, though no one had any real proof that she had. Still, he went out of his way to smear her name to everyone who'd listen. Now, I had a pretty good idea of where this whole mess with Emily was coming from. Mark had a thing for accusing people of cheating, and I realized he'd probably planted these ideas in Emily's head. The whole thing felt absurd. Here was my best friend of over a decade, letting some guy convince her that I was the kind of person to betray my husband. And not just that, she'd gone as far as to try to convince Alex of it, too. I couldn't let this slide. I decided it was time to go directly to Emily and see if she had the nerve to own up to it. I didn't expect much, but I needed to face her one last time. So I reached out to Emily and asked to meet her in person. She agreed, which honestly surprised me, and we met up at a coffee shop. She came in looking irritated, like I'd inconvenienced her, which only fueled my anger. I got straight to the point and asked her why she'd been sending Alex those messages and why she was trying to sabotage my marriage. She denied everything, of course, but her face said otherwise. She stammered, saying that she had no idea what I was talking about, that she was done trying to help, and that I was making things up because I couldn't handle the truth. I told her I knew about Mark, about his past, and how she'd been letting him feed her these ideas. That's when she lost it. She went on a rant about how I was always perfect, how I never made mistakes, and how she'd watched me have this picture-perfect life that made her feel like a failure. She admitted, almost as if she was proud of it, that she'd hoped I'd mess up so she wouldn't feel so miserable about herself. She called it justifiable, saying it was only fair that someone who always has it easy should finally face some real challenges. I was stunned. All this time, I thought we were on the same page, both supportive of each other's lives. And here she was, holding on to years of resentment. She had been waiting for any slip-up from me, anything to make herself feel better about her own life. I asked her if Mark had put her up to this, and she gave me a half answer, saying that maybe he helped her see things clearly. I realized then that this was about her and her own insecurities, not me. She didn't even care about my marriage or my happiness. She cared about bringing me down a notch to feel better about herself. I told her that if this was how she truly felt about me, then we were done for good. I left without looking back. A few days later, Sarah reached out to me, saying Emily had started telling mutual friends that I'd cut her out of my life over a misunderstanding, and that I couldn't handle hearing the truth. Luckily, Sarah and a few others knew enough about the situation to see through her story, and they weren't buying it. But I felt sad, more than anything. I'd lost a friend to her own envy and bitterness, and I felt foolish for not seeing it sooner. I had genuinely trusted her, shared some of my biggest moments with her, and thought she'd be by my side for years. Turns out she was just waiting for a reason to tear me down. Now, things have quieted down. Alex and I are doing fine, better than ever actually, because this whole mess reminded us how much we value our trust and honesty. We've been talking more openly about everything, just making sure we're both on the same page. I've moved on from Emily, but I won't lie. I still think about it sometimes, and it hurts. It's hard to let go of a friendship that once meant everything to me, but I've accepted that sometimes people change in ways you can't control. Emily chose her path, and I can only hope she finds peace within herself someday. But as for me, I'm grateful for the real relationships I have and the people who genuinely care.